All right, welcome to the Dad the Best I Can show. Today we are lucky to be joined by Dr. John Duffy. Dr. John Duffy is a psychologist in the Chicago area. He is the author of the new best-selling book, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. And of course, he is a dad. How's it going today, John?
It's going very well, relatively speaking. Rob, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. I thought of who can I talk to? We're recording this tonight, Monday, March 16th at 9 p.m. John was graceful enough to join us on the show to talk about what everybody is talking about, the coronavirus, COVID-19. Everything is happening so fast, and we really don't know what's going on. And I'm sure you're seeing it a lot in your office, a lot of anxiety.
Oh, like you wouldn't believe, Rob, like I've never seen before. I mean, I've been practicing for almost 25 years through 9/11, through other viral issues, and I've really honestly never seen a crisis like this before. I've never seen the reaction that I'm seeing from my clients before, and that this ominous feeling, especially here this Monday, that as a boy put it in my office earlier this evening, this feels like the first scene in the horror movie. Like things are about to get awful, but I can't get a beat on how awful it is, how anxious I should be, how fearful I should be, or whether I should be calm.
Yeah, it's that uncertainty is really the worst part. I'm sure bad news will actually be worse, but right now not knowing is terrifying.
I think that's exactly right. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so let's get to it. I had a bunch of people submit some questions that I'd love to hear your answers to. We had Allison Hare. She started off, she's the host of the Left of Center podcast. She wrote, "How do you not lose your shit on your kids while you are trying to work and be a good parent?" We're all homeschooling right now, so I'm sure you could
Yes.
speak to this.
Yeah, it's a great question, Allison, and and I think it's going to get harder, not easier, as time goes on. I think we're looking at the very least at weeks of this, so it's a very relevant question, and I think the key is to protect some time for yourself. So I think some of the parents I'm working with now feel just overwhelmed and like they're drowning in their kids and their work, despite the fact that they're at home. And this does not feel like any kind of vacation from anything for them, but actually a burden and a bigger workload. And what I'm encouraging them to do is to protect some time for themselves, away from the kids, away from the family, in a different area of the house, and download the Calm app or the Headspace app, do some meditation, listen to some music, do some yoga, do some exercise, but get out of that kind of crisis thinking that I need to be kind of with the family every second, every waking moment, and protect some time for yourself, and then you'll have some juice, some goodwill and positive energy to bring to the family, as opposed to just feeling tapped out like so many parents already do with their families. So we want to get you out of that space and into a space where you do some self-care every day so that you can feel energized a little bit to some extent, and invigorated enough that you have the energy to parent effectively without losing your shit, which is a very reasonable phrase in the circumstances.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory for everybody. And I mean, this parenting is hard enough as it is, and we're obviously very protective of our kids. So I do think, like you said, even carving out 7 minutes 3 times a day to go take a walk by yourself or do something really refills the tank and is a must these days.
Absolutely. I'll say that what I've been doing and a couple of other parents I'm working with are doing is just taking a jog through. If you're in an area that is not highly densely populated, being out and about and jogging or walking is a great way. Outside is not against the rules, and so I encourage that.
All right. Next question from Carolina. Carolina asks, how do you manage your anxiety and keep older kids, like about age 10 and up, calm?
Yeah. It's difficult. I think one thing we tend to do at times like this, totally understandable, is we end up staring at phones, at CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and inundating ourselves with information. And it's important to be well informed, but if you're like most of us, we are overplaying that and are probably stressing ourselves beyond reason. And I'm working with a lot of people who are in very much a crisis mode, which is also understandable, but at some point we do have to find a new temporary normal for ourselves so that we can be calm. If you can kind of think that way and start to structure your days so that you feel like, okay, it's going to be like this for a while. We're not going to be in crisis mode all day long. We're not going to survive that very well with cortisol flowing through our systems with such vigor. So we're going to approach our days with some sense of calm and some sense of structure. That way, mom or dad will be able to breathe. And if I can breathe, then I can kind of bring that to my parenting and also point to even maybe some familial upside to a situation that has seemingly nothing but downside, in that we are going to be able to spend some time together. We might be able to get some things done around the house that we would normally not be able to do. We might be able to create an in-joke or two, play a board game or two, so that this isn't just bad news.
Mm-hmm. How about talking to your kids about it? We have younger kids here, 7, 5, and 2, so they're a little easier to talk about, but I'm imagining 10, 13-year-olds, that are consuming this. How would you talk to them to, quell their anxiety while also keep them informed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, you want to ask them what they know, because by the time kids get to even 10, 11, 12, they know an awful lot of what's going on. They have access on whatever screen is before them, or through friends or other siblings. So don't assume your kids don't know. Ask them what they know. Ask them what they think and how they feel. Let them talk about their fears and their anxieties. And I really encourage parents on this point, do not dismiss them or minimize their fears, because your kids know to be anxious and fearful. And if you minimize the fear or the situation, that will actually spike their anxiety. It will not bring it down. So the first thing you want to do is acknowledge what they're feeling. And then you want to bring reason to it. Like, okay, so we want to look at this as a family more as a situation than a crisis. So what can we do? And kids like action steps. So if the action step is, we're going to hole up, we're going to stay home, and we're going to make sure that we kind of create that social distancing. That's going to be part of what we do as a family. Or we're going to, when we go to the grocery store, we're going to pick some stuff up for the neighbors. But to have some action plan as a family for what we're going to do to help mitigate the situation, kids do well with that too. At the very least, you want to make sure you're available to all your kids to talk about any of this stuff anytime, including your kids who seem fine or are quiet about this. Don't assume that because they're not talking about it, that it's not on their minds. I don't know the kid who is not thinking about this virtually every waking moment right now. So make sure you, at the very least, make yourself available to your kids, even if they're not overtly talking to you. Let them know that they absolutely can at any time.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful just to listen and not take for granted that just because they're quiet and not talking about it, they're not thinking about it.
Yep.
Julie asked, she said, I'm friends with a lot of parents of teenagers, and, with the social distancing going on, teenagers are always pushing back and wondering why they can't hang out with their friends. How can parents of teenagers, hold strong and the ones that don't really feel strong enough to tell their kids no?
Yes. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is a lot of parents, I find them like negotiating with their kids about, the social distancing. Can I get together with a couple of friends? Can I get together, just go out for a quick bite of ice cream? And once I think you find yourself in a negotiation, you've already lost. And a lot of experts are telling me no, this isn't an area where we want to negotiate, but we also don't want our kids thinking this is forever. So the idea of getting physically together with friends for now is off limits. And with our teenagers, we can just explain without negotiating that this social distancing, which in the margins is not a phrase I love a whole lot, Rob. I like the idea of physical distancing, but socially connecting. But that might be a discussion for another podcast. But I think it's important also to let your kids be in touch with their friends. So whether it's a phone call or FaceTime or some time on Snapchat or Instagram, some time to connect with their friends every day is important. A lot of the kids I'm working with are teenagers, and there is this fear that other kids are getting together or I'm missing out on something. And one way to help mitigate that, because that's a reasonable thing for kids to feel, is to give them some access to social media, or if your child is a gamer, to let them play, games with their friends virtually for some time during the day, not hours and hours, but a couple hours on the long end will allow them some time to connect so that they don't feel wholly disconnected with their friends, because that's not reasonable, especially as time goes on here. They're going to get more and more antsy and eager to be in touch with their friends. But to be physically with them right now, from my understanding of what's recommended here, is non-negotiable. And that's been the discussion in my office for the last several days. And kids understand, they're not thrilled about it. They're not excited about it, but they understand. And I don't think this is, I think it's important not to negotiate on this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you're in that space, it's very difficult to back out of it.
Yeah, well, that helps to hear. A couple more. I know you have to go. You've got clients waiting. Stephen Nolman from NolmanLaw.com. He's actually a family law attorney. He says a lot of my clients are freaking out, especially parents that you're seeing. Some are of the alarmist type, and then some kind of think that there's a lot of fear mongering going on. How can parents and spouses specifically connect with each other? This is a whole new dilemma for parents that have probably never been around each other this much, especially if they're going through some conflict. How can they come together in a time like this when they might not always agree on what's going on in the world?
I'm so glad you asked this one. Thank you, Stephen. So a lot of parents I'm working with disagrray about how to approach this with their kids. Like some feel like, okay, we need to make sure they know that we're in a crisis situation. Some want to protect their kids as best they can. The first thing I think it's important for parents to do is to approach this, like so many things in parenting, and it's difficult to do, as a united front, to co-parent and have that discussion before you're sitting down with your kids and kind of disagreeing in real time about your parenting approach in front of them. This leaves kids kind of unmoored and unglued unnecessarily. But if you can talk about, like, how are we going to approach this with the kids together, and what tone do we want to set, what vibe do we want to set? And if I can just throw a note in on this, Rob, the vibe you want is something below crisis, and above, like, I couldn't care less, where your kids are going to have some degree of anxiety. You're going to have some degree of anxiety. I think it's okay to share that. But again, once we're in crisis thinking, I don't think we're thinking very clearly. We're not making very good decisions, and we're not modeling a very good approach to the situation for our kids, because we want to think about, like, they're going to follow our lead. So we want to present a united front and something that consolidates, the calm but heightened approach that we want to bring to the situation.
Yeah, that's really good. There is some nuance to it. Doesn't have to be as polarized as to the world is ending or this is not a big deal. You can find some middle ground.
And I think it's important to talk about that, right?
Yeah. I mean, in general, though, you're seeing a lot of parents stuck at home for work and around each other. I'm sure conflicts are going to arise. Any tips on how parents or spouses can get along with this? I'm sure you're getting outside and taking some alone time is a valuable tip.
Absolutely. Yes, I think it's really important. I think marriages are going to be strained we're not protecting a whole lot of time. And I think in these first few days of the kind of lockdown quarantine vibe, it's okay to kind of get acclimated, but very quickly it's important to spend some time on your relationship. So to spend some time at night alone, to spend some time just taking that walk, to spend, to have a meal together while the kids are doing something else in some other part of the house, where you can just, normalize your relationship as well. That will help the kids feel better too. But it's also important, like, to fuel that relationship, because I think we're in for a reasonably long haul here, and none of our marriages have ever been through anything like this before, just like none of our parenting has. So we need to attend to them, no doubt about it. And I think protecting some space and time for them every single day is going to prove very important.
Very good, John. I know you got to run. Tell people where they can find more about what you're doing.
Yeah, DrJohnDuffy.com. You can find my book, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety, on Amazon.
All right, John. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. I really appreciate you hopping on the Dad the Best I Can podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.